Hey, I'm back, and we're working on this engine right here, stripping it down. I went ahead and pulled the 4 screws out. As you see here, they were Loctited pretty heavily in place, so I had to use a nut driver to get them out of the cylinder head. I went ahead and yanked the cylinder head assembly off. Looking at this without too much light apparently here for this, I'm kind of leaning towards this thing being salvageable. Yeah, you look at the skirt and everything, it looks really good. But there's a lot of carbon on it where it wasn't getting a clean, nice clean burn. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this rod off of here, off the crankshaft, just like that. And you want to keep in mind which way you took this off. Mostly there's a left and right side. You know, you want to keep in line how you pulled it off of the engine, you know. Sometimes the intake side, sometimes the exhaust side is different. I don't see, there's so much carbon on there, I don't see a mark though, but I don't see a difference. The piston's asymmetrical. It's a cool looking little deal. It's got a rather short skirt on it. That's about all I got to say about that. Well, let's take a look at how they've done this with the rocker arms, or the push rod drive system that raises and lowers and opens the valves. You know, the push rods go in this little divot. This gear turns around, it's got a cam on it. And that's what raises and lowers your push rods to open the valves. And of course it's got these really toy-like valves in it. I'm sure RC guys are used to seeing that quite a bit. The valves look okay, but if you look at this one, it looks a little black, like it's been leaking. So the valves may have been, like one may have been tight. I don't know. This could be the intake valve because it's cleaner. Can't get a really good look at that. Nothing to back it up against here. But that's the valves that are in these things. That should have a shiny ring on it, you would think, if it was seating good. So you can see where that one's been seating. Most of the time though, these, from my experience, just the valves get loose, so not tight. Now some engines, the valves will get tight. I can't really get the rest of this out on camera because these screws are probably really super tight. So that's about it for this engine. Yeah, it was probably salvageable, but I had no use for it. I'm going to salvage this key out of here and knock this crankshaft out, and yeah, take this cam out of there. It'll be a clean block then, you know, aluminum. Knock those bearings out maybe. Yeah, good to go. Let's take a look at the starter, if I can get rearranged here. if you do mess with this thing, just keep in mind you want to put these tappets, I would call them, back in place right where they came from and the exact orientation they came from, because they probably wore in a little bit, even though this is not showing a lot of wear. Okay, the starter. Now the starter on this model is different than the old school design where they have this retainer ring. It slips over the shaft right here. Well, I took, with this type of situation, a tool like this. I forced it in just like that and got underneath and wiggled it. And I went around until this ring popped off. Of course, it went flying 20 feet. Anyway, make sure you got a clean floor for that. So this is unwound because I already cut the string. You can see I got it kept in this little slot right here that they give you on almost every trimmer that I've seen, so that you can wind the string up, put the spool down in there, and wind your spring. There's a spring down in there. You can wind it up and then feed that string through your hole where your pull rope is. Feed it through here. Of course, you use a lighter to burn the end of the string so it's not frayed, and it'll feed right through that eyelet right there where you put your pull rope. So the knowledge I can impart to you about this is, if you ever have something that's recoiling slowly, it's that the spring has dirt and grease compacted on the inner coil of the spring. So taking the spring out of this encasement right here is a pain in the butt, because putting it back in is almost impossible. I mean, you gotta have good finger strength, you know, wind it back up and get it back in there. The same orientation it was before. When you take this spring out of here, let me see if I can knock it out without getting blinded or something. There it is. So you want to get the spring back in here if you do take it out, to clean it. And you don't want to put, you see it's pretty oily. You don't want to put grease on the spring, because the trimmer is constantly blowing in fresh cold air to cool the engine, so you're going to get dust. So the more oil you got on the spring, the quicker it gets to where it won't recoil quickly. And then people are like pulling on it and it won't go back in. Happens with the bigger lawnmowers that have a pull starter. Yeah, I've taken many of these springs out, put them back in backwards, of course, and then discovered that it was backwards. So you want to just keep an eye on the orientation. You don't want to bend anything. If anything, on this hook, you might want to try to increase it if it does look like it's starting to pull out, you know. And on the rope, you want to make sure you got plenty of rope. If you cut, like I cut this much off of the starter rope, just like I was going to use it again. I cut just barely enough off of it. Otherwise, a lot of times I'll actually untie this knot. This is a double knot. It's just not in something with a square knot, you know, like twice. That's all it is, and it makes that nice ball. But you want to have a little extra rope in there. That's why I went ahead and I would untie that. If the rope is in this good a condition, this rope is in really good shape, so there's really no reason to do anything. And usually it wears right at where your pull starter handle goes on. So, and you can get away with just cutting off the 3 or 4 inches like I did, but you don't want to have it where it's pulling on the spring and then it bends this, because the spring is too tight when you're pulling out the cord. So yeah, Don't put a lot of grease on this. When you put the starter back in, make sure you got enough tension on it, and just right before you put your fastener back on, because that's a one-way deal. You don't want to mess with that. But put it in, make sure it's got the spring tension on it, and you're going the right way, but you don't want to have it pulling that. Okay, for this video I'm just going to tack on this. I went ahead and stuck the spring assembly back on here. Now when I put this back in there, I want to have it where the pull starter handle is tight against the housing. So I usually go at least one turn, so that when I let go of the pull starter rope, it's got enough to pull that handle all the way down and hold it so it's not flopping in and out like this. You know, like you see some starters, because the spring is dirty, it won't go all the way back in. We want enough spring tension on something like this. Like one turn on this particular one will do it, but you don't want to go any farther than that, because you already got the rope wound up. So you just need it to actually just be enough to keep pressure on your pull handle. Okay, I'm going to show real quick, after I loosen these two screws up for this cam, how this cam comes out. If I can get a good shot of it. Let's see what we got here. So there's the cam. See the lobes on it? And of course this thing is just lubed from the crankcase, just like a regular 4-stroke engine. It's pretty cool. Pretty nice design there, I think.